Hello everybody, Robert Taylor with the American Classic Heritage Show. Can you believe we're getting ready to start on our second season of the American Classic Heritage, and we sure hope that you'll be able to watch it. Thanks for watching. Hello everybody, this is Robert Taylor with American Classic Heritage, and we're here today with the Shotwell family, and we're glad to have them. They're going to tell us about this A400 they got, and it's got a unique motor in it. Can you believe the motor was made in Russia? Well, it was, and Mike knows all about this car and his wife, so they're going to tell us all about it. So sit back and enjoy.
Hello, I'm Mike Shotwell, and I wanted to thank Robert for the introduction. This is our A400 Model A. This was an interesting car with a long, interesting history in the Model A world. And Robert talked a little bit about the Russian engine and so forth. Well, there's a lot of aspects of this car that are interesting, and one of them is that it's a California car. And we were able to trace this car back into the 50s. And then it was purchased by a couple of owners, and then the major restoration was done on it in the 1970s, in the I would say the late 60s and going into the early 70s. And it was put into a book by Ray Baker, a famous book on Model A's, the first book on Model A's, where they featured this exact car back in 1972. But what was not in the book were all the interesting interior things with this car. And this got into this situation with the Russian engine because the restorer, who was a very well-known restorer at the time, who had won a lot of awards in the beginning in the Model A world with Mark and Mafka, the two Model A organizations. And he had come across in 1965 65 engines that were shipped out of Russia. When he was planning, when he was doing the restoration, and it arrived just in time for him. And he took those engines and they opened the crates and down at Ford Obsolete in California, a very famous early supplier of Model A goods. And they took their crowbars and opened these incredible crates, and the engines were inside it, shipped through Czechoslovakia from Russia, because going back into the history of these cars, Henry Ford is the man who actually established the Russian Detroit, they call it the Russian Detroit, near Moscow, about 200 miles away from Moscow. And they had a non-competition agreement. After the war and after the Korean War, these were surplus, these engines, and they were what's called Model B engines. They were the higher development of the Model A engine. And so the 65 of these were surreptitiously shipped through Czechoslovakia from Russia, and they arrived in Long Beach, California, and voila, we have one in this car. It was installed in this car. The nice part about it is it's a very powerful engine. This car can run quite a bit quicker than a normal Model A. But Mr. Dave Treichel, who was the owner who did the restoration, was a meticulous restorer. And he took this car, they painted it. They had one of the top body guys fixing bodies in California at the time, and they were very close friends, and they all got together and worked on this car. And we've been able to actually trace back into the 60s the people that worked on this car, two other people who actually worked on this car that I've spoken with. They're now in their 80s. And it was wonderful to add to the history of it. The Russian engine is interesting because being a Model B, they were able to improve this engine, and we'll take a look at that engine in a little while to show you how different. It looks like a Model A engine, but it's actually a more powerful engine. And what I thought would be interesting is to take a look at the Russian markings that we first noticed. And if you look closely, you can see the M for Molotov. This was Stalin's right-hand man who they created the factory in his honor. And you can see an M, and then there's a Russian word coming along here, which you'll see you'll see a photo of that. But here's that M. Now, if I push my finger down there, you can probably see the raised lettering on the casting. It was getting, by this time, this was cast so late that they were getting worn down, all the markings. But here you can see it. You can still see it. He also did other interesting things that I'm sure we're going to get into about this car. Other things that were installed on this car. It was put together with actual Model A parts rather than replacement parts that were done in subsequent years. This car is just an actual showcase for original parts, original Model A parts. And that's one of the things that makes a car stand out. We also are interested in the transmission in the car that Mr. Treichel put in it. It's a synchro mesh transmission, a 1939 Ford that makes it much easier to drive, and boy does my wife love that, and so do I, as a matter of fact. And it has hydraulic brakes that were put into it, which are a little safer than the mechanical brakes, more modern. You know, now they're very much outmoded, but it was, for that time, it was better. And also has a steering with a Ford F100 steering box in it, which makes it a little easier to drive. So this car is an absolute joy on the road and tours, and we love to drive this car. This is not a car that it's been shown at national conventions and so forth, but we do enjoy driving the car. All right, I'd like to show you the book, the actual book that was published in 1972. This was by Ray Miller, and once again, it was called Henry's Lady. And this really was the first galvanizing book to the public about Model A Fords, because prior to that, they were sort of just fun cars for people in the 60s and 50s. I bought my first Model A when I was 13 for $50 back in 1955. And sold it. I destroyed the car as a kid, and 3 years later, I sold it to a junkyard for $5. I've been paying penance ever since, let me tell you, for the cars that we're getting now. I sure love to have that car back too. But this was the book that came out that really changed the Model A collecting world. And this particular car, this A400, was used. It's a convertible sedan, and which is the only Model A made like this, where you can the windows roll up, and it still has a top that goes down. There's no other Model A that's made like this, and that's what they made it so unique. And I'll talk about that in a second. The book, the fun thing about the book is that it illustrates every Model A type of car, which nobody really understood. And at the time that this car came out, there were only about 7 of them known in the world. I'm the ex-president of the A400 group, and it's an international group, and we've been able to track only about 125 of these cars around the world that are actually drivable. There are more known. There are about 300 known, but some of them are pickup trucks, and their tops were cut off. They were made into hot rods and other things like that. But actual running A400 automobiles, about 125. So it's an extremely rare car. Far more rare, for instance, than a Duesenberg or something like of that nature. You know, a very, very expensive car. But this book and in the A400, they conveniently left out the fact that he had upgraded the brakes and the transmission, but that didn't care because it looks the same. When you look at this car, you can't tell the difference. So but they did it for safety and made it a speedier car too. So that works very well. To talk a little bit and to understand the history of what happened with Model A Fords, Henry Ford built these cars between 1928 and 1931, and this was built in 1931, and they only built this car for about half a year. And remember that the Depression struck in 1929, so this is 1931, and you're talking about some serious, serious problems. This car, these cars, he took a couple of models of Model A's, and he sort of spiced them up, and he put side mounts on them on both sides, and they were able to make them look richer than a normal Model A. And with the Depression there, and people that owned Packards couldn't afford Packards anymore, so they wanted to buy a little spiffier type of Model A. It still didn't work very well because the Depression just destroyed everything. So, but they did make these cars for, as I said, about 5 months. What happened with Henry Ford is that he began working on the factory. They began working on the V8 engines, which came out in 1932. You know, you all probably know about the Deuce Coupe, or the little Deuce Coupe, or the Deuces they called them, the 1932s, that had the 60 horsepower V8 engines in them. And so the Model B engine was developed around the same time because Henry Ford wanted to continue with the four-cylinder engines, but he was forced by his son and by other people to move into the V8 world. But they had these Model B technology out. Now, he was now going to move into a new phase of car that was a faster car, more modern car. And well, what do you do with all this equipment, this Model A equipment that they had in the factories, in the River Rouge plant, and all of this huge operation that they had? So they transferred over. It took them, I think it was about 9 months or something, to transfer over to the new form. They actually shut the factory down. But in the meantime, he has all this Model A equipment. So what does he do? He ends up, the Russian government, and Henry Ford was very, very, very opposed to Stalin and the communists and the Russian government. However, they were waving a lot of money at him, and he took advantage of it. They purchased all of this equipment and an agreement for 75,000 cars. And this was during the Depression years, and this was a lot of money. And they opened up a new factory, and they even worked with an American company to go to Russia to build the new Russian Detroit. And it was about, as I said, it was about 200 miles away from Moscow at the time. They uplifted a village, moved all the people out. They didn't care about them. They just gutted the place, and they built in 1 year. They started in 1930. In 1931, they completed a new town of about 35,000 people to build these cars. But basically what Henry Ford did was build cars, put them in crates, and move them over, and the Russians just assembled them and then pretended that they were manufacturing cars for several years. About 2,000 American workers went over, between 2,000 and 3,000 actually, that went over there to join this new wonderful world of socialism and this new communist world that was going to be so wonderful for everybody. And very few of those, once they were there, they paid them a lot of money. They worked for a year. They got everything going for several years. And then, of course, the mid-30s came along, and Stalin and the Great Terrors and the destruction of humanity that went on in Russia. But these cars were actually being built, and they continued building these engines because they were so practical. And that went they did that all the way through the Korean War when the Russians came down to support the North Koreans, communist government, and with China, and we had the Korean War fought over the 38th parallel and what was going to take place in the expansion of communism in Asia. So these engines came out that were surplus engines, and they built these, and they worked very well in the Korean War. And we actually have pictures of the Jeeps and all, and there've been some really interesting work done on it. Where all of these Jeeps, where are they today? There's only a few of them, but these engines, I mean, they have an insignia on the side of the engine from Molotov, an M, and in the timing gears, it's in honor of Molotov. And if any of you can pull your history books out and understand who Molotov was, he was the bloody right hand of Stalin, who probably signed something like 2 million warrants, death warrants himself. And so these are called fondly by the early researchers the communist engines. And as I said in the article that we wrote on it, I said we're happy to have a communist engine, but we don't want the political aspects to go along with it. So I'd like to now bring my wife into this. We're a partnership, and we're into this car and all of our cars and our collections. We're into it very much together, and she drives all these cars, and well, we enjoy them immensely. And so I'm going to bring her in now to say a few words about the car and her enjoyment of them and so forth. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Gwyneth Shotwell, Mike's wife, and the co-owner of this beautiful car. And I think my role in this partnership has a lot to do with enjoying the beauty of the car. And actually my background with cars probably starts when I was growing up and had two older brothers who both loved working on old cars, kind of like Mike described, getting his Model A and taking the engine out and seeing how it worked. And I really enjoyed cars and couldn't wait to get my driver's license. And I was lucky enough that my first car that I owned was a stick shift. And I had to learn how to drive a stick shift before I got that car, and learned in an old Ranchero with my stepfather and stalled a lot of times. But boy, once I learned how to drive it, I just loved driving a stick shift and loved that first car. And so when we got into the Model A hobby, which I didn't realize at first that it really is a world of couples. A lot of people think that the car world is just for guys, but it really is not. So we got involved with our local club in the Peachtree City area, and it's just been a wonderful part of our life. And a lot of the women do drive the cars, and I love driving this car. As Mike mentioned, it has a synchronous transmission, which really does help in the driving of the car. Just when you need to slow down and go around a corner, you don't have to bring it to a complete stop to double clutch it and get it into first. It makes a huge difference, just that one little aspect of it, and one thing that makes it so nice to drive. And so when we first bought this car and we started working on it, it was very interesting to see all the things that went into really just kind of sprucing it up and making it ours, and making it, I really think of it as a piece of jewelry. I just really enjoy it. And when we first got it, the color combination, the subtlety of the combination of the colors, we wanted to name our Henry's Lady, and I suggested the name of Grace. My grandmother, Grace Jones, was an elegant lady, and we also were thinking of Grace Kelly and what an elegant platinum blonde with her pearls, champagne colored dresses, and we said, all right, this is Gracie. This is going to be our Gracie. So whenever we go out in the garage, I look across the garage and see this car, and it is a beautiful piece of jewelry. That's really how I think of it. And one of the things that I like too is, Mike mentioned, we've got a stone guard on here, which is the original stone guard from the car. It's heavier than the reproductions today. It was in fairly bad repair, just age, and so we had that replated, and so it gives a nice shiny look on it. We found a wonderful 1931 pair of license plates. Just some of those little details are the kinds of things that I really enjoy about the car, and it's just a real joy to drive. Another fun feature related to this car is that Mike and I ended up writing a story, a history of the car that we were lucky enough to get published in the Restorer magazine, the national magazine for MAVCA. And Mike has always been a collector, really enjoys the history, researching the history of when he first started out, Civil War artifacts, and we've always really enjoyed that aspect of collecting. And so, of course, when we found out that it had this Russian engine, let me back up one step and say that the way we found out it had the Russian engine was that we had it up at Bentley's Antique Auto. He and his guys were doing all the wonderful work on this car. And he called Mike one day after they'd taken the engine out, and he says, "Mike, I don't know what's going on here. There's Russian lettering on the side of this engine." Well, that started us off and started doing research on the car, and that's how we found out more about the history and particularly about the Russian engine, which was so fascinating. So we decided that that would be a story that other Model A people might enjoy knowing about. So we've done a lot of writing together over the years in our business and also extracurricular writing of stories and whatnot. So we had a great time putting together the story of this car, all aspects of our having purchased it. We got to meet the folks that we bought it from on a subsequent trip to California. I had lunch with them one day, and it just added another aspect of enjoyment to the car. And so we were able to tell the whole sequence of finding out about the engine, finding out more about the plant in Russia, and then going on to what we had done to the car, all the way to the last polishing, spit and polish that we had done up in Roswell by a wonderful detailer up there to get this car the way it is. Following the publication of that article, we were fortunate enough to get an annual award from MAVCA for that article. And after that, they had the National MAVCA Meet was in Marquette, Michigan, and we were able to show that car there. They were very excited to have the car featured at the final banquet. And so in the great hall on the lake there, we had the car there sitting up next to the podium, and on the other side was the 20 millionth car. And it was a very special evening because Edsel Ford II, the great-grandson of Henry Ford, was our special guest. And so it was really fun to have him come and talk about his enjoyment of seeing all the Model A's he'd encountered and to see what a world of people there are out there who love the cars, want to promote the cars, want to preserve the cars, and then that he really appreciated our beautiful A400. So it was a pretty special night, and all of that coming out of this interesting engine. It's a pretty interesting story. Now, Mike was talking about the history of Ford helping to create a plant in Russia. And one of the aspects was that Russia had a lot of gold, and they were mining a lot of gold. And so at that time, when the plant, the equipment was going over, they were able to pay Henry Ford in gold. And so it was a very interesting, paradoxical situation, relationship between this communist government and very capitalist Henry Ford. But it actually ended up being sort of a mutually positive relationship. He made sure, as we said, that there was a non-competition. They were actually making Phaetons and other Model A's, but they were not allowed to export them to other countries. So when the crates came over in this shipping container from Czechoslovakia with the Russian equipment, it was through Czechoslovakia, so technically it was not being exported from Russia to the United States, and that's how they got around it, and that's how Ford Obsolete and the fellow who restored our car was able to take advantage of this very interesting engine.
Well, that is really interesting about Henry Ford. He was doing business overseas when other people wasn't back in those days, wouldn't you say?
Well, that's true, and he found a really interesting solution to the problem of being able to transition over for manufacturing the 32s and beyond, and found this market in Russia, which was pretty unusual. He did have factories around the world, but he also was known for being able to, have forests where he could his lumber and being able to control and manufacture sort of all the parts that he needed.
Oh, yeah.
So he was used to looking outside the United States, and this was a pretty unique opportunity that he saw.
Well, and he took advantage of it, and it worked out real well for him. He was a real shrewd businessman, no question about it. Mm-hmm. And so if it was an opportunity there, he would take advantage of it.
Yes, and he certainly did.
Some of them came with transmissions, some of them came with short blocks, some of them were complete engines and complete transmissions. And obviously, Dave Treichel, the man who restored this car, who owned this car, didn't use one of their transmissions because he wanted to put in a synchromesh, and that was a 1939 Ford synchromesh transmission that he put in the car. So we got an engine, and as to how complete it was, I'm not exactly positive, because we pulled the engine apart and looked at it when we re-restored the car, and took a look in there at that's where we found the Russian lettering on the timing gears,
right.
and we studied the one on the block. I had to do a lot of research on the lettering on the side of the block for Molotov and so forth, but it's all quite interesting history, very, very interesting history, and in this everything about this car is historical.
It is, and that's almost a miracle that would happen in that way to make it so you could enjoy it today. But anyway, a lot of these old car stories come from rare finds and stuff that just kind of unique situations in a lot of cases, and it's great that those things happen so we can enjoy them and see the cars today. And you seem to know an awful lot about it, and we appreciate it.
Well, let me tell you another interesting story. As when I was the president of the A400 group, there was some research that I had done early on, and that somebody else had done, and then I kind of dug it up and took a look at it. There was a man that had bought, a farmer. He bought about 25 Model A's, and one of them was an A400, and he put them in a gully sideways to catch the silt, so that he wanted to farm the land, and so he thought naturally it would fill up with silt and he wouldn't have to move all the dirt in and so forth. So he bought all these cars. He got them for probably a couple of dollars a piece, or who knows what he got them for. Probably free for hauling them away. And he put this A400 in. Well, when this young man came a number of years later, he saw, he looked down, he said, "My goodness, there's an A400 down there in this gully," because the silt never filled it in. Well, what happened, one of the guys wanted one of the other cars, and he took the A400, and they dragged these things. The farmer gave them to him for $10 or $5 or something, and because it didn't work, the silt didn't work. So he dragged them. They got the chains and everything, and a winch, and they pulled them out of the gully up on the side of this hill, and it was only a half a car. The whole half the car had rotted out. So he got home. He didn't know what to do with it. They dragged it onto a truck and dragged it home. And by God, he started advertising for it, and he found another car that had been wrecked on the other side on the East Coast. And so these people bought this other half of the car, and they married these two A400s into one, and they even had the plates on the inside, the two of them. And we've done our darndest to try to find that car. We can't find it, but it's well documented. It's done. So you have even strange incidents like that, with the restoration world. And,
well, that's an interesting story, Mike. But listen, why don't you show us this old motor and stuff that you've been talking about, so we can show the people this motor that come from Russia. And if you don't mind, raise the hood and Tell us about it.
All right, we're looking here at the, before we open the hood up, we should probably talk about the, this 3-door hood on it. This is an original 3-door hood. It was an aftermarket purchase for it, but it was an upgrade. It gave the car an upgraded kind of a look, and that's what they were aiming for with these A400s. Not everyone put these on, but this is the kind of thing that was incorporated in this car to make it look more expensive at the time. Also, while we're going in, you can see the difficulties that the side mounts make for getting in and working on the engine. Because you have these big side mounts. And most of the Model A's only had, if they had a side mount, it was on only one side when they came out of the factory. But you could purchase this after at the dealership, and they could put a second matching side mount. This, of course, in 1972, when Mr. Entress'ink remodeled the car, he did not have the chrome bands on it. We spiffed it up a little bit with that, or the former owner did, I should say. And these wonderful mirrors that are strapped in with these leather straps over, they're absolutely useless, incidentally. When you drive down the road, they bounce around and you can't see, but they sure look good. And that's what you're after with this kind of a car. The mirrors, seeing out of these cars, there are some difficulties with it. It's not like a modern car, looking at a great big window in the back and so forth. But and they're flashy. When you stand on the side and look at the profile of the car, the side mounts make them look very flashy. But let me go ahead and pull the hood here, and we'll talk a little bit about, I think what I'll do is just lay this back. I might go back and talk a little bit about how much this car has been driven since the 70s. And we believe that this car, when we purchased it, from the beginning of the car to today, it was driven 56,000 miles. And so when Mr. Entress'ink got it, when he restored he kept the speedometer the same, we believe. We're quite certain of that. Maybe not 100%, but quite certain that we're on target with that. When we took this engine apart, it has very little wear inside it. And it's probably only been driven about maybe at the maximum 5,000 miles since 1972. Mr. Entress'ink didn't drive it very much. He passed away in the 80s, and we don't drive. We show this car a lot, and we don't drive it out a lot. We'll take it on day tours and things, but not overnight for long, grueling tours and so forth. But the engine looks like it did when it was brand new. This is actually the heater that comes off the manifold, and Mr. Taylor could come down and describe every aspect of this engine far better than me. But it's clean and beautiful and looks like it came out of the factory. These are the kinds of spark plugs that were used, the distributor, the manifold, the carburetor is down here, and it also has oil pans down at the bottom to catch any dripping oil. All Model A's drip oil, incidentally. It's not something the matter with them. That's just what they do. This is the head down here, the head for the 4-cylinder engine, and this was a distributor. But everything has been restored. The firewall is painted and extremely clean. We had all of this work done. We had the entire front clip pulled off when we re-restored the car, and had everything basically from the windshield out revamped and redone. I talked a little bit earlier about the castings, the block castings that were done with the Russian markings on it, the M, and there's a word, a Russian word that's kind of bent in an arc on it. It's very small and difficult to see, because as they made these, this was at the tail end when we were making these cars, and the castings got weaker and weaker with the numbers, but it was very legible. And when we wrote our article, we actually enhanced those pictures and could clearly show the lettering with Molotov's name. And then traced that back in history to know what exactly they put on the side of the car, and we could match it up perfectly. So, but we know what this engine is. This is the Russian engine, and it looks very, very similar to a modern, or I say a modern, a Model A engine looks like it. And this is the Model B, which was more powerful, and then this is an enhanced even Model B engine with the extra horsepower that when they perfected it. The actual castings they used, it's very interesting that when Henry Ford did his castings in the River Rouge plant, they would actually bring up, he bought battleships, and they would strip them down and bring them into the furnaces and use that steel to build cars. He also had tons and tons of Model A's, thousands and thousands of Model A's that were now not being driven any longer, and they would take them and throw them into the vat too. So what you got was a steel that had imperfections in it. But the engines, because the compression ratios and everything, they didn't stress them a whole lot. But when the Russians built them, they used a Swedish casting, and it was a preferred casting. It's actually a little rougher. If you look down, you can see the little kind of the stippling on it. So it's a little rougher casting, but they are better engines than that were actually in the Model A's. Gwyneth talked about, a few minutes ago, she talked about the stone guard that was put on. This was just a rusting mass that the former owner put in the back seat when we got the car. And we had it taken apart and replated. And you can see some of the filigree down here, the kind of fine metalwork, which is not on the reproductions today. So this was an original one, and we felt it's a great deal more expensive to reconstruct something like this than to buy a reproduction. But we felt for this car that it was very worth doing, and shows it off quite well. These are actual license plates from 1931, and of course we put this on here just to show that we're from Georgia because we're proud of it. But the license plates were beautifully redone, and they took all the dents out of them and had them refinished beautifully. This is the Quail, and they're beautiful reproductions. They look almost identical to the originals. So here you have a car, and when you're restoring it, you know, you're looking at the hood, and you're looking at the three doors, and you're looking at the interesting stone guard, and you have the Quail, and you have some of these elements on it that really bring you back in time and make the car an authentic restoration. And that's the joy that we have. Also the side mounts, and particularly on this car with this Model A, the dual side mounts, I think, show it off very, very nicely. These are what I earlier talked about, the mirrors, that are a strap-on with these leather straps. And as I said, you can see that these side mounts jiggle a little bit. Well, that's not so great when you're driving down a bumpy road and the mirrors bouncing around. But the whole idea is it's for looks. It's not we're not too concerned. We don't use them anyway. These are the main mirrors that we use are these ones on the side, and then of course the mirror up here, which is an original, that mirror, and we'll look at that when we go inside the car. These are also interesting plates. These were original plates, and we found this is the only one that I've ever seen that when Mr. Treshelle put the car back, and when we looked in the book, Henry's Lady Book, it still had these red reflectors. Well, all of the reflectors on Model A reproduction parts are all blue. And we actually were able to track it down because one was cracked. So where do you find another red reflector that matches the one on the other side? We didn't want to get rid of that. And we actually found they came off of Schwinn bicycles from back in I don't know, the 30s or something. We're not really sure what era it was, but I was able to purchase 2 or 3 of them, so I've got some extras too, and found it, of all places, on eBay.
Okay.
And these are step plates, and the step plates are for so you don't when you get in the car, they're just an added embellishment, for getting in the car. They're not necessary, they're just nice. They look good. I had a replacement top put on it, and this top has never been down, as a matter of fact. Actually, we prefer to keep the top up just because it can get pretty warm in Georgia. So, but we sure like the looks of it. And we use the same color combination that was used, that Mr. Entress'ink did. The same amount of snaps, everything is identical to it. This has got a dash that's very unique though. The normal Model A dash is a little clover leaf. And this was designed with what they call a 5-instrument dash, which had more gauges, and it fit over the other dash. So, and it was an aftermarket. And we replaced the interior of it, had it replated, and replaced this because this was a 1930s motif with the engine turn metal. This is a faux grain. You may or may not be able to see this in the air, but it's actually a faux wood grain on the dash, and you can see it on the sides of the windows. There, you can see more clearly the kind of wood grain that they had. Now that is not wood, that's metal, that's expertly done to look like wood. They have pockets on the doors, which was unusual for Model A's. And we've added turn signals just for modern convenience. This car also has 1931 air conditioning. And what is 1931 air conditioning? It means that you don't have air conditioning, but you can move the windshield out. And these brackets here, you can swing this windshield out, and you don't want to swing it out too far because you're going to get some stones through you. But if you do it a little bit, the air comes in out there and is forced down, and so that you get a wall of cooler air as you're driving coming down on your legs, and it's actually quite nice. You can see the pinstriping on it, which is quite nice. Also, the choke is down here, which you need when you start the car. This has got the modern transmission, and it's only about 2 inches different placement than a Model A, actual Model A. So it looks identical to a Model A to all practical purposes. And you can see the gas pedal right down here. That is a footrest. That's the gas pedal, and that's the starter up in the top. That's where your starter is. So you press on the starter, you pull the choke out and let it in. The car fires up. This car fires up beautifully and runs beautifully.
So here we are in the inside of the car, and Mike was describing, about the dash. When he was talking about this turned metal, this very attractive turned metal plating on there, what was originally in there when we received the car was kind of it was almost like what you'd use in your cupboards. It was a fake wood graining applique on it, and so we decided to take that off and chose to have this other turned thing and keep this unique configuration of the dash. You've got your key here, of course. This is your speedometer, your odometer. Has the water temperature, oil pressure, battery, all that stuff. So in many ways it seems very modern. And of course, the gear shift and the clutch and all of that, normal kind of configuration. And one of the things that I like the best about it, Mike described the wonderful air conditioning that you have. We really do actually have a heater, and that was on the engine when you're looking under the hood. And what that does is that it forces the hot air out through this little door, that little silver door on the front there, and it's on a little hinge that just swings open. So you can turn up the heat by putting your toe there and flipping the door open. And so there's just a round opening there, and the heat comes in, and it will actually stop partway closed, a little bit more closed and fully closed. So you can adjust how much heat you're getting into the car, which is very nice. And on a cold morning, believe me, it is a nice feature to have, and we really enjoy it. In the back seat features ashtrays, actually. I can put this down so you can see it better. They're also very rare. It was one of the upgrades to the A400 in general that made it, you know, kind of the spiffier feature of the car. The seats themselves, I folded this down. The actual seat will then go folded up again so that it's kind of standing on its top to access even more room to get into the back seat. It's a very comfortable back seat. There's lots of leg room, actually. They have this depressed footwell on this particular model so that when you get in, it gives you more room for your feet and your legs. Very nice armrests in the back seat. So it's a very, very comfortable back seat experience. Okay, so we have a window in the back that is, you know, part of the convertible top, and it is a glass window, and so that's our window into the back, and there's really fairly good visibility, even though it's not a very large window. With the back windows in the car, the combination makes it you know, pretty easy to see out of the car, and then with your side mirrors, the ones that are up here near the windows that you can actually see. So that's how that works, and it folds down, and as part of the mechanism, if you were to take the top down, it folds nicely down so that it doesn't get scratched or anything like that. So it works quite well. These are our seat belts, which we also put in for safety, and they obviously come up around to the front seat. But this gives you really ample room to get into the back seat. And it's very easy. It's lightweight. It's well balanced so that it's easy to operate, and then it just goes back down and seat back, and you're ready to go.
And, this was an original car trunk from from the period 1931 period of time, and when we got it with the restoration, it had been brown with a kind of a leathery finish on it. It wasn't real leather. It was like a fake thing. So we had it stripped and then painted the exact same color as the. So this is a little bit different than Dave Treischel's car that went into the book that we talked about, the Henry's Lady book. But they handcrafted a platform here to hold it. We tried to resurrect the one that Dave Treischel had. It had been welded together, and we attempted to plate it, and it didn't work out. So we do have a reproduction. That's one of the only reproduction things on this car. In the back, I was told a very interesting thing by Dave Davis, who worked with Dave Treischel on the car. And he said that he recalls vividly that when this car was stripped in 1968 or 69, I can't remember which year it was, but right around that time, the end of the 60s, he remembered on the back that that there was a great big U.S. steel insignia on the back, and that it was sanded down smooth and filled in. It was a slight depression on it, and he said it really was very, very distinctive. They'd never seen that on another car. So obviously in the Ford plant, when they made this car, they were working directly with U.S. steel metal plates, and he says it was beautifully centered right in the back. Some of the parts of this car were reproduced from other Model A's, like the fenders. I think the rear fenders, maybe not, but possibly them. And these doors, these were on the 1931 Victorias at the same time that they were building the A400s. And they were able to incorporate them, which was nice because they're very wide and you could access the car. You had a lot of ability to access the car. Some of the other Model A's, the doors are much shorter and you really have to wedge yourself in. The other advantage of these cars and what makes them so rare and collectible today is the idea that you can roll. These have a frame that you can roll them up. When the other cars, the Phaetons that didn't have any windows in the side, they had to put in curtains made out of made out of the top material. And then they have little windows in those, you know, to keep the rain out. But here you could actually roll the windows up, which was pretty spiffy and for a convertible, and that's why the convertible sedans are so sought after.
Well, boys, we've really had a good day here at American Classic Heritage. Can you believe all that stuff Mike knows about this car? And you know what's really unique about it is his wife. And she knows near about as much about it as he does. And that's a wonderful thing about our hobby. The husband don't go off and play golf and go hunting and all that and leave his wife at home. He takes his wife with him. And so that makes it a really good hobby to be in. And these people are unique in every way, the automobile and their situation. So we are real proud to have them on American Classic Heritage today.